There's been a slow shift in the perspective on Meta's recent strategy change that happened 2 weeks ago, with the shocking news of the closure of 4 of their first-party studios, closely followed by laying off 1,500 people who directly worked at Meta. And at first, everyone was extremely angry, with some VR users threatening to boycott Meta altogether in terms of their VR use for the future. And this is no doubt made more realistic with the announcement and potential imminent release of Valve's PSVR and standalone VR headset, Steam Frame. But in a very short space of time, this is now being seen and spoken about as a positive, and I want to explore that narrative and potentially counter it as the video goes on. Right now, the positive aspect is that natural growth can now happen again for VR. Now, we've clearly got no idea without going back in time if this is actually a good thing to celebrate at all. VR might have actually died altogether in the eyes of many people in the public, since so many people use MetaQuest for standalone and PSVR gaming, and many developers have built their whole studio built off the back of the money they made from that platform. But anyway, Meta have thrown billions into VR gaming, and that money has given us some excellent exclusives like Batman Arkham Shadow, Asgard's Wrath 2, and many others, including PSVR games from Oculus Studios. And they also provided some cost-effective hardware that actually is impressive, like MetaQuest 3. But obviously, due to the news, it's clear that Meta are not making a return on this investment, and now it seems Zuckerberg's vision for the metaverse is now starting to ease off, at least for VR, and instead they are putting their focus for Horizon on mobile phone gaming users. All of this good news starts with version 85 of the Horizon OS, because this will be the start of sunsetting Horizon from our eye lines when we actually put on our quests, and I for one am extremely happy with this part of all of this mess. Now I want to quickly mention it's a real shame that user feedback wasn't enough for Meta to see this was a change they needed to do anyway. It was instead money and looking bad to investors that actually made the change happen, because it was clear to everyone, including them, Horizon wasn't working from the day they decided you could no longer uninstall Horizon from your Quest, which meant lots of people were clearly uninstalling it and celebrating about it on social media. Instead, they chose to force feed it to us, making it the default landing page. So every time you went into your headset, you are greeted with colourful AI VR gaming slop that only made you want to do one thing, and that was take your headset back off again. But thankfully, this will soon stop, and the sooner the better. But I'm starting to wonder if it's already too late. Over the last week, Boz has suddenly been jumping into interviews saying all the right things, that they were wrong in their vision for VR and Horizon, and this comes across to me as justification for the closures and also some damage control, because the impact of all of this could be a very long and slow road to recovery for VR, or more so Meta. Those of us who use Quest now might not do so in the future, which is obviously hard to imagine, but it's not unthinkable, and I want to go into detail why. But before I get into that, firstly, I don't want to be too negative on the now. Firstly, I think Quest users will be okay for 2026. It won't be a great year, but we'll still have some good games coming, and Meta are still seemingly investing in third-party studios and developers, which of course is a massively good thing. Meta behind the scenes have invested in thousands of VR games, and most of them you would never even know that they were Meta funded. They also help studios with marketing budgets, which is imperative in today's world, with social media being the place for news, honest takes and awareness, versus the old days of magazines, news articles and television. So if everything Meta is saying still does happen, and they are investing in these developers, things might be okay. But I've said this before and I'll say it again, exclusive games do a lot to drive people to buy consoles or even a VR headset. Technically speaking, we just lost 3 huge Meta studios making games that could have potentially been the biggest games for that platform of the year. So what happens next? I think in general terms, VR is going to go back to the 2016, 2017 and 2018 era of VR, with small developers and more established studios like Vertigo Games, Skydance, Resolution Games, Endreams and many others we already know as VR first studios making the big hitters. This also means a return of seeing games that are actually unique, and they will also be more visible on the Quest Store due to not being overshadowed firstly by Horizon, and then secondly by colossal releases with massive budgets that cast such a big shadow that some developers are even scared to release their games anywhere around that game. Now I also want to point out that every VR studio that isn't owned by Meta normally releases on multi-platforms, so they will release a game on Quest, PSVR and sometimes PSVR 2 at the same time. There is some outliers of course, especially on PSVR 2, because some of these games are indeed funded by Sony, like Endream Synapse as an example. So we're talking about games made by developers for gamers who are not tied to any one system, and when it comes to Quest, I worry developers who want to make Quest only games will only be focusing on what works and makes the most money, and its biggest audience right now is children. These games can obviously be fun fun to play due to being unique or so bad and low quality, they are somehow good for 20 minutes, like this one you've been watching today called Viper Vice, which is an attempt to bring GTA Vice City to Quest. And let's be clear, it's absolutely terrible from an adult perspective, and especially to those of us lucky enough to play the real thing in VR. And I could critique the hell out of Viper Vice as a playtester for days, but I can already see, even in its current state, creators will be making spoof shorts and the developers making some money, and good on them, because they've read the room. They understand the platform and they understand the platform user base, but this is my issue. The reason we're in this mess is that the majority of people now on Quest don't want to buy good games, because the majority are kids and they don't care about things like frame rate, physics, interactions, or even graphics. We've had some truly epic games on Quest, but most of these are also available on other platforms, and with the imminent release of Steam Frame coming in at a price which is going to be far more costly than Quest, I doubt parents will buy it for their kids as a Christmas present, and kids probably aren't even that interested in it anyway, but we have to remember it is still a standalone headset for developers to release their games on. So what I'm saying is the Meta Store is now filled with games not for adults, but it is filled with games that make money on that platform. So in theory, let's say Vertigo Games make Arizona Sunshine 3. They will no doubt make a PSVR version, a Quest version, and definitely a standalone version for Steam Frame. And they could potentially make more money from Steam Frame purely because it's already got the right audience, the people who have their own income who want to buy good games. Now maybe I'm wrong, maybe Steam Frame won't sell enough units to make any of that a possibility, but right now all things point to some adult Quest owners being ready to move on so that they feel comfortable playing games online without constantly being shouted at or hear racial comments every time they join an online lobby. Now I don't want this to sound like a rant, but I've seen some very positive takes from Meta's sudden change, and I want to counter this with another possibility, that this could all be too late and that the damage to the platform is already done, at least until we see the release of Quest 4, which is still rumoured to be in 2028. And with tech giants like Apple, Samsung, Google and others making high fidelity mixed reality AR headsets, we can't even be sure that VR gaming will still be a focus of Meta anyway. So there we have it, there's my take on the situation, and God forbid this becomes a VR news channel, but January is a quiet month, and I can't wait to get back to actually reviewing some VR games for all of you who subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments on this video, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.